Hey everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network, leaders, colleagues, partners, anybody in my network and beyond, growing network. I want to get to those great leads that can introduce me to books that have made an impact on their work, on their life, on their business. All of these worlds they're worlds that intersect, so it impacts everything that we do and touch and work in. And the three categories of books that I cover in this series are the first category where they're sharing with me a book that I haven't read. The second category is where we're discussing a book we've both read, whether specifically we read it for the series or we read it in our past lives before the series. And the third category is when I get to have the author and or publisher on the series to talk about the book, to give it a voice, to give it a face, to put a tone to the message that they want to get out there to the masses. And my guest today is Judi Neal. And Judi's an author, scholar, and consultant. Her focus is workplace spirituality and personal and organizational transformation. After receiving her Ph.D. from Yale University, she served as an internal consultant at Honeywell, and Judi taught management at the University of New Haven and then became the director of the Tyson Center for Faith and Spirituality in the Workplace at the University of Arkansas. Author of 10 books on workplace spirituality and transformation, she's the president of Edgewalkers International and executive director of the Global Consciousness Institute. And I was lucky enough to meet Judi a couple of years ago after I had Karen Centeo on the podcast for episode 31, where she covered Alla Weinberg's book, A Culture of Safety, Building a Work Environment Where People Can Think, Collaborate, and Innovate, which I then had Alla on for episode 42 to cover the book. In any case, when Karen posted on LinkedIn about our podcast, she had tagged Judi in it, tagged me in it, and then said to Judi in the post that I was a fellow Edgewalker. That piqued my curiosity. So I took a look at Judi's page, tried to learn what I could about what she's about, and reached out to her to have a conversation on the series. Things got away from me. It is my fault. It's been a while now, but I'm glad that she's able to sit down for this conversation. So Judi, thank you so much. I'm thankful for Karen tagging you in that conversation and that post. Just so I could learn a little bit about you. And I'm thankful for you being here for this conversation.
Oh, John, and thank you. Thank you. I'm very thankful for your curiosity and your generosity, because your curiosity about people and their work and how this all makes the world a better place. You don't just take it in and keep it to yourself. You share it with others. And we need more of that in leadership. Thank you so much for who you are.
No, I appreciate that. It's, I've mentioned it before. The series started for one particular reason, kind of like to get my name out there and have great conversations. It delivers, I thought it would deliver what it does today, but it delivers so much more because it's only grown my curiosity even more. Everybody's really a dance partner in these conversations, the things that we bring to it. Sometimes I slip and call it an interview, but for me, an interview is just kind of picking the information from the guest, whereas I like to have a conversation where it is really back and forth, kind of processing and learning and kind of regurgitating in real time what I'm hearing and just kind of building from there. So I appreciate your words. I appreciate your appreciation. And again, thank you for having this conversation. Judi, who are you today? Obviously, I read the bio, great bio. I can only imagine the deep history that is in your experience of all your different positions and places in your career. But who are you today? What is the work that you look like today? If you could kind of walk us through it so that we get a sense of who it is that's sharing their book with us.
Wow. That's a profound question. It's funny because I haven't even thought about who I am. I often think about what I do versus who I am. But I would say I'm a person who cares deeply about the value of spirituality in everyone's life, whatever their particular background or path might be. And it's central to who I am. And I'm a trusting person. And I would say my key guiding principle is to trust the universe, to trust what's emerging or what my intuition tells me. And in terms of kind of the generic "who are you" that people say, like when they meet you at a cocktail party, and they really mean, "What do you do?" um, I spend a lot of time working on our organization called Edgewalkers International, and I spend some time writing, particularly applied spirituality kind of writing, taking a particular principle like forgiveness or compassion and talking about how that can be used in everyday life. And I run the Global Consciousness Institute, as you mentioned, which is a group of colleagues who care about the idea of global consciousness in business schools and in leadership development. This idea that we're global citizens. So we're developing curriculum and experiences for people and writing and research. So it's a mixed bag. And then my spiritual practice is music. I love music. I love singing and writing and playing guitar and doing music with other people. That feels very connecting and meaningful to me. So it is this mixed bag of a little of this, a little of that, or a lot of this sometimes, and not too much of that, and just trying to balance it all and show up.
The next question is always kind of to get a walkthrough of who you've been since you entered the workforce. Obviously, spirituality plays a big role in the work that you do, who you are. I mean, you even mentioned spirituality through music, which I'm going to dive into too, because I love music. Before anything, though, because there is that spirituality component, how do you just, because I think it's going to come up often, how do you define spirituality? What does that look like to you?
Mm. Yeah, I define spirituality as connection, and I think there's two primary directions of that connection. And so one of those is of a vertical connection, a connection to something greater than ourselves, however we might define that. It might be God, or it might be Allah, or Buddha mind, or Christ consciousness, or indigenous wisdom. There's just many expressions of whatever that is that's greater than ourselves. I usually use the word universe on a personal level. Um, and I'm always thinking about what is it and what's my relationship to it. It's still very mysterious to me, but I know there's something there and it makes a difference. So that's that vertical connection. And then the other horizontal connection is, how then do you live and how then do you lead? What is your connection to other people, to living systems, to the planet, to social justice, to communities, to the country that you live in? It's these connections, and are they heart-centered? Are they compassionate? Are they creative? That is the expression of whatever that is that's greater than us through you out to others. So I think full spirituality has both components, and they're a way to live, a way to be.
Judi, so the work that you do, what does that look like? Is that facilitations? Is it group presentations, group coaching, one-on-one? What is the actual work with your clients of your company? What does that look like?
All of the above. And I don't do so much of the work myself now. I'm at that stage of my life where I want to pass the work on to others. So there is coaching, for instance, and I've trained 30 people in the Edgewalker coaching approach using assessment tools that we've created. We have two tools, three actually, I should say, because one isn't out in the public yet. One tool is called the Edgewalker Profile, and it talks about, or it measures the 5 qualities of an edgewalker and the 5 skills of an edgewalker. And it gives a person a report on what are their real strengths if they want to develop themselves more as an edgewalker leader, and it has action steps and so on that's personalized for them. The other instrument is called the Archetypes of Change. And as I have done presentations and strategic planning meetings for companies and various kinds of things where I am teaching courses, when I bring in the Edgewalker concept, there will always be people who say, I'm not an Edgewalker, is what's my value in an organization? And so I really began thinking about typologies or archetypes that particularly in relationship to change, because my whole professional background's been in change management. And so I created this model that has 5 archetypes of change, Edgewalkers being one of them. Edgewalkers actually being a smaller percentage of the overall population, but a significant role in organizations. So the Archetypes of Change assessment helps people know what's their sort of natural relationship to change. And then they can figure out if there's some other area they would like to develop, or do they need other people on their team that have more of that orientation or worldview. So we use that tool in our coaching and in our workshops. We have retreats. The big thing we're doing now is really building a community of people who resonate with the concept of Edgewalkers and who want to not be kind of the only crazy one in the system. Because Edgewalkers are on the edge. They're not in the mainstream, and that is where change happens. We know that from quantum physics, that change happens on the edge of systems, and it can get lonely on that edge. And so we bring together people who feel called to this way of seeing things to support them, to support their spiritual and their professional development. So we've created the Edgewalker International Network to support people that way, in those ways.
So much like I asked you to define spirituality, I want to ask the same for Edgewalker. Based on the context you've provided, we can kind of guess what it means, but can you provide a little more substance to what Edgewalker actually means, like what it looks like, some examples? Again, we have an idea, but it'd be great for you to break down what that concept or mindset looks like.
Yeah, thank you. The original definition was people who walk between worlds and who build bridges between those worlds. I grew up in Hawaii, which, lucky me, was a wonderful place to grow up. I grew up as a haole, which is the Hawaiian word for foreigner or white person, in a very diverse environment. And there was something so wonderful about being in that diverse environment that was inclusive and accepting. And so I got to experience my first boyfriend was Filipino. My best friend was Japanese. I was in their homes. I got to experience their food and their way of living and their music. And it broadened me from my early experience of growing up as a child in California. And so I think that first planted the seeds of thinking about there are people who have visited foreign countries or lived in foreign countries or learned another language, are seeing more of the world than some others. And what are the costs and benefits of those kinds of life experiences? So later, when I was teaching at the University of New Haven, one of my first students was Mari Ishihara, who's from Japan originally and now lives in California. And Mari was getting her MBA. She was one of the brightest students I ever had, and she's still a very dear friend. Mari went back to Japan to work in Tokyo in finance systems. And she said, after living in America, I had a very tough time fitting in with the patriarchal Japanese culture because even though I had an MBA, I had high grades, I was, very qualified, all they wanted me to do was serve tea. So she came back to New York and started working in New York. And in New York, they didn't value her Japanese culture. And she was like, I don't fit anywhere. And there was that discomfort, which actually made her delve more deeply into her own Japanese culture to integrate it into the American way of being. And so she found a way to build bridges between the two cultures and to offer the best of what both cultures bring. So that really got me to thinking about other ways people live in different worlds. And for instance, another doctoral student that I had was an IT specialist, but her heart was in the people side of business. And so she went back to get her doctorate in human resources after having a strong background in IT. And so she was cross-functional. I just mentioned kind of cross-cultural experiences, but Sharon was cross-functional. And somewhere in there, I started studying shamanism because shamans on a spiritual level teach people how to walk between worlds. And I found people who had the title of corporate shaman, that they were bringing that into the corporation and learning from them. So I guess the original definition of people who walk between worlds and build bridges between worlds stands. But to enrich it, it is cross-functional, it's cross-cultural, it's non-hierarchical. It is people who want to be on the edge, really looking at the future and what might emerge, very, very interested and drawn to the future and co-creating the future with others. So that's it. That's how I'm defining it these days.
Yeah. I love that how it does seem to evolve based on what the structure is you're talking about, whether it's life, whether it's culture, whether it's business, whether it's educate, whatever it might be. The other question I was going to ask about that was, so where do you think, what are your thoughts on where that comes from in somebody? There may be examples like your student who she was kind of torn between the Japanese culture and American business kind of thing. But where do you think in general that might come from in people that are open to it? Because somebody may exist in between those two worlds, or if it's education, business, whatever it may be, and they kind of gravitate towards one, let go of the other, or vice versa, or they just kind of get pulled in both directions at once without really controlling it. So where do you think that ability to really walk that edge, controlling it yourself and not just letting it fall to chance, where do you think that comes from in somebody, in each person that might be an edge walker?
Well, I think, I used to think it was sort of a DNA kind of thing, that some people are just born that way and others aren't. But I don't believe that anymore, because as I've done presentations and people tell me their stories, they push back on me and say, no, I used to not be like that. And then maybe there was this opening experience, sometimes a traumatic experience, sometimes a deeply spiritual experience. Something is transformative that takes them off sort of the tried and true, predictable career path and wakes them up and heads them in a different direction. And so I started paying attention to those stories, which led to many of the stories that are in the book Edgewalkers, these stories of transformation. Most of the time, those stories are uncomfortable. Divorce, being challenged with a life and death situation, losing one's job unexpectedly. I mean, these real awful, difficult turning points. Sometimes they're more cosmic than that, if I can use that word, that you just feel a calling to walk into, like Martin Root, who's Jewish, felt called to walk into a Christian church one day when he was in Canada doing some consulting. He just couldn't, it was like this magnetic attraction that he went in there, and he received a message while sitting in this beautiful church that his work had to be more explicitly spiritual than it had been. And he changed the trajectory of his work. And that was not a painful transformation experience. That was very uplifting and inspiring. And so I hear a few of those kinds of stories. I hope that we as humans can learn more from positive experiences and not have to go through some tragic loss sometimes to find out more
Yeah.
what our calling is.
Yeah. I have so many guests that have come on that um, they're so in tune with the world around them. Their sympathy is enhanced, their empathy is enhanced. And it all comes from, similar to what you say, just a disruption in their life, a trauma, big T, little t, whatever, however you may define
Yeah.
it, however you may call it, but it enhances their sensitivity to the world. It's almost like these experiences have broken them down so much that, yeah, you can build yourself up stronger, but that sensitivity that you have to the world, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So it is
That,
interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that's so beautifully said. And so I want to ask you, John, because you said when you heard from Karen the term edgewalkers, you resonated with it. And so can you share with us why you resonated with it and anything about my definition that you relate to or that you challenge?
No, I relate to it in short, just because I've been somebody that's always, based on my experiences as a kid, I'm always, it's like that song, like I still haven't found what I'm looking for, where there's just this calling, there's something out there. And I compare it to kind of Maslow's hierarchy, where my basic needs, my physiological needs, my safety needs are met, but then everything above that is the area where you play, where you explore.
Yeah.
So, and I say that only because I have this incredible sense of curiosity where I'm always off trying to learn different things. So I mention all that as so as to say I'm anchored, my family's is taken care of, I'm providing for my family, my responsibilities in that kind of script of life are taken care of. The rest is my area to play with. The rest is my area to explore, to be anything I want, to learn about anything that I want. But to go back to your question, it stems from my childhood, my own childhood disruption, and not really accepting only what life gives me. So I have my responsibilities, I get those out of the way, but aside from, again, my responsibilities, my safety of my family, them being taken care of, I'm not good playing with the script. I'm not good playing along, um, because it is a script, this general script that so many people before us have lived in their lives. It's a different world, but I don't want to kind of just check the boxes on the way to my tombstone. I can't. It makes me. It's almost claustrophobic. So I
Wow.
need to get out and play. I need to get out and create. Behind me, I have my bass guitar, my guitar. My sister got me a ukulele. I got my drum kit. So I think it comes down to life has its responsibilities that you want to choose or not to come through on, which I do. But the rest, I gotta get out there just like a big canvas and paint and make it what I want, or else I go nuts. I can't be tamed, I guess, is what I'm trying to get there.
I love that. That could be a
So
bumper sticker.
yeah, yeah. So I all of that resonates with,
Mm,
you're called to this culture, that culture, these habits or those, this education or that. It's just life is just too infinite to be kind of pigeonholed into a
yeah.
box of some sort, and it drives me batty. And when you realize that and you don't let yourself be caged like that, again, I always repeat it, responsibilities seen through,
Mm,
get out there and live life. So for me, walking the edge of some sort is just living life.
mhm.
So that's essentially where my edge walking comes from, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. When you talk about being caged, I think the other side of that, and I hear you in the way you talk about sort of adventure and exploration, there's being caged and there's being predictable, and bored would be the other word that I hear about. It's like
Yeah.
you, some people are comfortable. They prefer that. It really works for them, the stability. Some people are like, I just get too edgy. I'm hemmed in. I've got to try something new. I've got to have some change. I've got to grow. I need to try something else. I just can't be hemmed in. And we don't honor that in organizations. We honor predictability and stability
Oh yeah.
only,
Yeah.
and that will turn an organization into a dinosaur. It's just
Absolutely.
too rigid. So part of my passion is, how do we help leaders to first of all own their own edgewalkerness, because we all have it in us,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
aliveness you talk about, and then look for and honor the edgewalkers in their organizations who can help the organization grow and innovate and be creative and have more meaning and purpose, more impact in the world.
Yeah, I'm interested. It'll probably be for after this discussion, but I'm interested in learning about the other types outside of edge walking, because I do think it's one of those things like with coaching where it's like I don't make recommendations. I don't tell you what to think, but I open you up to the options.
Mm,
Here are some considerations. And you kind of get a sense of who is meant to do those things because they'll look at the list, or if we're discussing them and they come alive. But there are other people that are like, you know what? I don't need all this other stuff. To put it in so many words, I just need a paycheck. I just need to do what I need to do, and that's it.
yeah.
So I feel like there's a place for everybody. There's a type for
Mhm.
everybody, but there's always that openness that if you're curious to look into the other ones, they're there for the taking, and there's no right way to do it. But I always want people to be aware that there are options. That's
Right.
all I want to do. I just want you to consider these are because there are some people, whatever the topic may be, as soon as you ask them a question that they've never been asked, their world, their eyes just light up. No one's ever asked me that. I didn't think that was possible. So that's why I like leaving that door open, allowing people, come on in if you're curious or introducing it to them. So there's just so much there. We're so
Mm,
different as people. Nothing is cookie cutter. So I like
yeah.
the fact that there is a type for everyone.
Yeah. And I want to share with you a technique that a friend of mine used in his very successful coaching business. His name was Roger Husbands, and he's now on the other side. And his technique was to videotape his coaching sessions with these executives. And then together they would watch the coaching session afterwards. And the key question Roger would ask the CEO or executive he was working with is, watch where your eyes light up,
Yeah.
because that is so much information. And that's what you're paying attention to, John. And that we can all pay attention. We can feel when our eyes light up.
Mm.
And so if we can learn more about that, that is such a wonderful guiding post to whatever it is that we're seeking.
Yeah, because I've seen, as we're building our careers, building our businesses, whatever it may be, I think people have an idea coming out of college or going into the workforce of what success looks like. So a lot of people feel if they've founded a business, if they're making so much money, if they have this car, if they have this house and this thing, that those are markers of success. But we know
Mhm.
people that have all those things, and it's like there's no life in their eyes.
Yeah.
So when you ask certain questions and you see what gets people going, their body language, when their eyes light up, when they tell you, no one's ever asked me that, I've never thought of that before. That's I think what makes my job as a coach worth it, is just kind of awakening someone to what the possibilities are. Not even getting them a defined answer, but
Mhm.
just kind of waking them up from this kind of rigmarole of life, if you will.
Thought you were going to say rigor mortis of life.
Might as well be. Sometimes it might as well be,
I
time to
know.
make the donuts.
Yeah.
Judi, to learn more about you and how you got here, can you walk me through, it doesn't have to be too in depth or nothing crazy, but just kind of walk me through. You provided a little of your life that you grew up in Hawaii,
Mhm.
coming from California, but what did your path from, say, high school to now look like? Because I'm always curious what it is that puts somebody on that path and what that path
Mhm.
looked like to what they're passionate about today, like how you got to talking about spirituality and edge walking. You gave some examples, but I think seeing kind of your career progression and your development, just kind of like a general overview, gives us an additional perspective to how you got here.
Yeah, it's non-traditional because when I was growing up, like in high school, I grew up in the 50s, and so the expectation was you get married and you have children. Your husband goes to work. But I always felt, and I wanted to do that, but I always felt that there was something more, and I didn't know what it was. Um, and I went to high school and did well and went to college for a year. And then in my family, my father just felt like it didn't make sense to continue to send a girl to college, that I should just get married. And he refused to pay any more money to support me. And I got really upset and ran away from home. Running away from home in Hawaii is hard.
It's like not being able to cross the street, so you got to walk around the block on the sidewalk when you're a kid or whatever.
You
What
have you have to get an airplane. So I took off to California,
Oh
and
wow.
and
What
yeah,
what did you study, or what did you want to study?
music.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to study music. By the way, I'm a bass player too.
Oh, nice.
But I didn't learn how to play bass until I was 60.
Yeah, I just bought one 2 years ago when I was, what, 44, so,
Yeah. See,
you get that curiosity, it's like,
I
why
don't know
not? I mean,
if you can see my instruments behind me. Probably not,
a
but
little bit.
yeah, yeah, it's like, yeah, and ukulele. I played ukulele in Hawaii. Um, so yeah, I wanted to be either a musician or an English teacher. I loved English. I loved the depth of reading. Um,
The
what you could
music, because anybody in your family musical, or it was just kind of innate
No,
and you were curious about it?
I think it's more of the culture of Hawaii because
Oh,
it
yeah,
was,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Everybody played music. All social events were music. It's in the air.
Yeah.
That's what we did with our friends all the time. Um, Yeah, so not so much in my family. All my children and grandchildren are musical though now, so that makes me feel pretty good.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So California?
Yeah, went to California and got pregnant and had to get married, and that seemed to stop the any ideas of future um, profession.
Mhm.
But I taught myself accounting, if you can believe it.
How does somebody that loves music and they're drawn, well, I mean, I guess you had to do what you had to do, obviously, and learn what was available to you, but it's just interesting, somebody that is so creative in music, and then in the next breath, it's like accounting.
Well, they're systems. Music
Yeah,
is a
that's
system.
true. Very
Accounting is a system. There's a way of thinking that's 2 or 3 or 4 dimensional, that things fit together. And so I happen to be really good at that. And that led me to taking an H&R Block course to learn how to do taxes. These were things my husband allowed me to do. Those were back in the day.
yeah.
Uh, and he didn't stay my husband for all that long. After 8 years, it was just too hard to be me and be caged like
Mm.
that. We talked about organizations caging you, and that traditional marriage form caged me. I wanted to go back to school, and that led to our divorce. And I did go back to school and was studying accounting. I was an accounting major until I took a course in organizational behavior.
Mm.
And what I haven't talked about is on and off in my life, these spiritual experiences, they're mystical, that told me there's something more. Um, yeah, they're always mysterious, but that was always sort of an underlying secret inner life. And in this organizational behavior class, there were things about self-awareness. And you mentioned Maslow. I mean, that was core to what we were taught. And so much of the course was around self-knowledge, self-awareness, and then how do we become aware when we're in a group and help the group to its highest potential, taught facilitation skills. I thrived in that environment, and I was going through the divorce, and self-awareness was really important. And that course just was that light in my eyes that opened everything up. So I shifted my major and became an organizational behavior full-time student, and learned that, and I was going to Quinnipiac College in Connecticut. Are you
How
in?
did you? Yes, yeah,
You're in Connecticut, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Quinnipiac is maybe 25 minutes from me. How did you end up in Connecticut?
Well, I met a man in Hawaii that I married that was from Connecticut, so we
Okay,
eventually moved to Connecticut, and that's where I got divorced and went back to college at Quinnipiac,
okay.
and found that there was a doctoral program at Yale in organizational behavior, and that was the only university nearby. I couldn't move because of my children, and lo and behold, Yale accepted me. And I didn't, no one in my family has ever gone to college, and so I didn't know that you're supposed to get a master's before you get a PhD.
Yeah.
You know,
And same with, I was the first one in my family to go to college. So yeah, like I finally sorted out. I'm like, oh, this one comes first. Okay, all right.
yeah, I don't know how the game is played. Nobody ever
Yeah.
taught me that. And apparently Yale didn't care. So I went straight from a bachelor's at Quinnipiac to the PhD program in Yale,
Oh wow. Okay.
which was really hard because um, it's interesting. Even education has its predictability, and undergraduate work was memorize and regurgitate, and I could do that really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yale wanted you to think for yourself and challenge prevailing theories and paradigms and create something new. That hurt my brain. but but eventually I learned and got it, and what a gift that was. And so I continued to study organizational behavior, and then realized I don't just want to talk theoretically about this stuff. I want to do it. I want to be involved in change.
Hmm.
And an internship came up at Honeywell in Arizona to be a part of an organizational development team that was transforming a system. And I got into doing that, and eventually got hired by Honeywell, and and that's where I did my dissertation, was on how that change was managed and how transformation happens. So that really led me into the writing and the research that I've done since then. Many wonderful gifts have come from that.
So where along that path, we've spoken about spirituality, we've spoken
Mm.
about edge walking. So where along that path did those paradigms, mindsets, beliefs, where did those spark? When did you start picking those ideas up?
Well, that's where the traumatic experience comes in. As I worked for Honeywell in Arizona, and then went from there to work for Honeywell in Illinois, uh, from large computer products division to the defense systems division. They were implementing a socio-technical systems approach, which is very empowering, very exciting way of changing a system in an organization. And so I got to be the internal OD consultant on that work. The drawback was that it was an ammunition plant, and I learned that the ammunition that was being produced was faulty. It's being produced for the Army and the Navy and the Air Force. And faulty ammunition in any situation is dangerous, but in those situations puts our servicemen's lives in danger. And I became a whistleblower. And that doesn't make you very popular in organizations.
Yeah.
And so the day that I called internally to our ethics hotline to report what I had discovered, um, that day I was reading a book by Shakti Gawain called Creative Visualization. That was my spiritual practice at the time, was to read something inspiring and spiritual at night. I didn't belong to a church or synagogue or other religious institution. I didn't have a spiritual teacher. I read books. I guess it's probably the path of an academic, a scholar. And I would read these books that would inspire me and help me feel a sense of inner peace. And that day when I put my life on the line, basically, and I did have my life threatened, um, what I read in this book, Shakti Gawain, was this phrase, the universe is a mirror, and that we draw to ourselves that which we need to learn. And I'm thinking, what did I just draw to myself the day that I learned that our company was breaking the law, putting people's lives in danger? And no one, a lot of people knew about it. No one would call. No one, they were too afraid of losing their job. Unemployment was 23% in Illinois at the time. And so I said, I'm an outsider. I'm from Connecticut. I can afford to lose my job. I'm going to take the risk. It feels like it's mine to do. And when I read that the universe is a mirror, I'm like, well, how would I label this situation? And for me, what came to me was this system has a lack of integrity. Well, if that's a mirror for me and I have to look at my own lack of integrity, what is that? And I had to really look at my people pleasing and my not telling the full truth about what I would see, my fear of confronting and conflict, and just really how I was run by fear a lot.
Yeah.
And so that was my spiritual wake-up call from inner sort of intellectual interest to like, oh my goodness, this stuff matters in who you are and how you live every day. And that changed everything. And I said, okay, this is all happening for a reason that's bigger than I understand. I will trust it. And I will keep following one step at a time. And that's the way I've lived ever since.
So does the edge walking follow from there? Or is it kind of just more of a refined idea of what that really looks like?
Well, because I started doing research. I left Honeywell. I went back to University of New Haven and started doing research right away on spirituality in the workplace because I had wanted to understand more about my own spiritual experience and knowing there's others who had similar experiences. And so I would interview leaders who have very strong spiritual life. And that's what the Edgewalker book is the summary of what I've pulled out of those leadership interviews. And what are their qualities and what are their skills? How do they manage to live in the spiritual world and the material world at the same time? And that just, the word edgewalkers became a not so scary word as the word spirituality. So this was in the 90s that I was writing, and the word spirituality in the business world and in business schools was, you bring that up and you're a flake. You're just woo woo. You have
Yeah.
no legitimacy. And I wanted to give it legitimacy, that I thought it was so powerful for me and so powerful for others. Let's research it. Let's codify it. We've created professional associations and academic journals. And we've done a lot of things, a whole community of people to legitimize it. And it's still probably not anywhere near legitimized as it could be in terms of the power to make a difference. But that became part of the mission and the vision.
So then at what point, obviously after that, but how did you go about next in your career, your business, your organization? What was it? Was it after this kind of research on spirituality? Were you launched from there, or what did that look like?
Well, I stayed at the university, but I began to teach. Um, I was at the University of New Haven for 17 years, and I began to teach courses on workplace spirituality and continued to write, continued to find others. Yeah, again, it's like the edgewalkers in academia. That was who I was trying to find at first, as well as the edgewalkers in corporate worlds, to tell their stories, to give other people courage to live their spirituality more fully if they're called to do it. Not everyone is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, it's like respecting each person's path, whatever it might be. And so I continued to be at the university, and eventually I brought a lawsuit against Honeywell because I learned that the way I was treated after I blew the whistle, having my life threatened, having to disappear, being basically locked in my office, not allowed to go out, so I don't cause any more trouble, as my anonymity was not protected. There's just, corporations don't like it at all.
Yeah.
And eventually I left because I just couldn't work under those circumstances. So years later, I brought a lawsuit. I won in federal court under the whistleblower statutes and received a small sum. They equated it with sexual harassment, which baffles me because it's not the same.
Almost like that backward thinking that any issue that a woman brings up just falls into sexual harassment. Like that. It's
Yeah,
almost like it all gets lumped in for them in that old school thinking
yeah,
we'll lump it into that.
yeah.
What decade was that, or what year was that where you blew the whistle?
I blew the whistle, let's see, in the late 80s,
Okay.
87. Um, and I started at the university in 88 at University of New Haven. And the lawsuit I brought in around 1990. The lawsuit took about 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it became my second part-time job. And I treated it as a spiritual path. It's like, how do you do this out of the highest integrity, without hate, without compassion, without blame? It just, and I had wonderful lawyers who got who I was and honored that. And eventually we won, and I got my settlement. And I left the university and started the Center for Spirit at Work, a nonprofit organization, to really more fully support those who are integrating their spirituality in their work. Did more writing. And then a few years later, I learned about the Center for Faith and Spirituality in the Workplace that was being founded at the University of Arkansas. And I applied for that job and got it. And so I moved to Arkansas.
In my mind, I've been following your map, like Hawaii and Connecticut, Arizona, Illinois.
Yeah.
Judi, a few more questions before we jump into your books, but how do you reconcile from your childhood what you're doing today? I'm always curious in somebody who they are as a child, which of those aspects, how much of that childhood, their being in those years plays a role in or shows up in the work that they're doing today. How do you
Mm.
reconcile who you were as a kid to the work you're doing today?
Have you ever read James Hillman's book, The Soul's Code? Soul apostrophe S,
No.
Soul's Code. You would love it, John. You
Okay.
would love it because that book is about that question.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
And what he says is that we have not only the physical DNA, we have a spiritual DNA, and that our calling is encoded in that spiritual DNA. And so your question is coming from that wisdom. I think that's the way I hear it. And so as a child, I did have spiritual experiences. I saw angels. I had a light being as a friend. Um, his name was Ray.
Uh,
He was a ray of light.
yeah, yeah.
And it was, so I may have been very imaginative and over impressionable, but it had meaning for me.
Hmm.
Um, and when I had a girlfriend at 11 that we started going to her church together in Hawaii, and church was mystical and wonderful. I just filled my soul. So I had these experiences and these leanings towards spirituality as a child. Um, so that has been a theme throughout my life. What has been a dramatic change is, as a child and as a young adult, painfully shy, to the point of in my early 20s, literally agoraphobic. I wouldn't leave my house because I was terrified of running into a neighbor or having to talk to another human being. So very, very introverted to an unhealthy level. And I'm not that way now. I've traveled the world and have friends all over the world, and on Zoom and with people all the time.
How
And
did
love.
how did what was the shift? Was it for you? What do you believe changed you the most from that agoraphobia, the extreme introversion that you considered unhealthy, to now being completely different? What was it that shifted your mind when it comes to
You
that?
will love the answer to this. Music. I was playing music at home by myself, and somehow I heard about a neighbor, a woman who was my age, who had two children, the ages of my children, who played guitar and sang. And I thought about it for the longest time. And I learned about her through my kids at their school. And I couldn't not reach out to her. I had to reach out to her. And I remember the day she lived 2 blocks from me. And I remember the day I carried my guitar and walked over to her house. I was shaking because it was like the first kind of time out of my house to go see another person. And we had such a wonderful time together. And so we started doing that once a week. And then she told me about a coffee house this was in Virginia, um, and that she would go to this coffee house and listen to other people sing. And so we went. Made myself go to that, and I made myself take guitar lessons. It was like pushing against that prison, I guess I'm using that word again, that I had
Yeah.
created for myself, and pushing out of it. And I met Bob Zentz, who ran that coffee house and folk society there in Washington, in Virginia. And about that time, my husband got a job in Connecticut, and we were going to move. And so the music got me out of the house and into a sense of community of other musicians. And when we moved to Connecticut, we moved to Branford. I said, I still need music in my life. And I asked Bob
Mm.
if he knew anybody in Connecticut, and he knew some people and put me in touch with them. And I started the Branford Folk Music Society, which, as far as I know, is still going. And that would be near 40 years now.
Wow.
Um, and so it was this sense of calling around being with others with music that overcame whatever that extreme introversion was. And I think it's the same. Well, it is the same for even, a scholar. Is scholarly work is very isolating, alone work. But there's something in me, this calling for community, for other crazy people who are on the edge, to build a community of edgewalkers. It's um, it's another thing that's wired into me, along with, it's like this tension. I want to be alone. I can stay in my house for a month and never see another person, be perfectly fine. My husband and I isolated for 3 years in COVID.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine, other than we think the world's falling apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also was on 4 or 5 Zooms internationally with people doing meaningful work. So community is really central to overcoming that isolation and being closed off. Community and calling. I think I would say those two things made a difference to me. I don't know if it's that way for most people, but I think when someone is holding themselves back, if they can really affirm that sense of there's something more, like you talked about, John, there's this sense of seeking. There's more for me to do. I don't know what it is, but I have to take steps towards it.
I think it's incredible that I think it's incredible because I had this, I call it the quiet, the triad of quiet, right? When I was a kid, I've written about it. It was not confident, shy, and introverted. And they're three very different things. And I had like the triad, right? But it's interesting. And I still tell people that I'm an introvert, and they're like, yeah, but you're doing podcasts, you're speaking on stages and this and that. But I think this part of it, the work, it plays into what you're saying, because it's like you have this physical, and I've had the introversion. So I'm not saying you have. I've had that. It's almost like an affliction, like again, a cage. But then you know that there's something out there for you. You had this kind of whispering in your ear. There's a mom 2 blocks away, and she's got a guitar. I've heard she plays. Like, it's amazing that you can break out of that temporary prison and kind of take these steps. I can't imagine. I can't imagine doing that, but it makes sense where it's kind of like there's this physical sensation you have, the safety of being home, but your heart and your spirituality, whatever it is, this higher calling is pulling on you.
Mm-hmm.
So I can relate to that, and I think that's beautiful that that's what kind of drew you out to where you are now. Because I mean, I think you get to the point where you realize how much you contribute, how much good energy you put out there, and it just is kind of like this ripple effect, a cascading, because you learn more about yourself as you go as well, and share more and learn more, and it's kind of this perpetual cycle.
Yeah, it really is transformative, and I guess I'm living proof, and so are you, that people can change. And edgewalkers are all about change, and if we can really believe that change can happen, we can take those small steps. If we don't believe it, we can't. We're stuck.
Yeah, and I think so many people think that progress has to be seismic shifts, or that it all has to happen in one day, or if I fell this day, that's it, it's over, instead of kind of that incremental experimentation of, yeah, safety or security, but at the same time balancing that with exploration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's both and. I think it's mostly incremental steps, and sometimes it's seismic. Sometimes that bolt of lightning hits us.
Yeah.
But mostly it's incremental.
Judi, what do you consider your superpower?
Connection. I connect others.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
What about you? What's your superpower?
I think curiosity.
Yeah.
I think curiosity and pointing out to others, just making sure that somebody knows the value that I see in them.
Mm,
or that I believe is not just that I see it, but is their value. Not that it's all of it, but that just being able to tell somebody the value that I see in them, because I think we don't do that enough.
yeah.
I think it's when people pass and their obituaries and speeches, that's when everybody comes out of the woodwork and shares what they
Yeah.
thought of this person. I try to get into that habit of really letting somebody know what I feel for them, how important they are, just because I think people need, not from me, but just in general, that kind of understanding, that affirmation of, I see you, I see the value you're bringing, something to that effect. And it is that curiosity for community.
Yeah. But have people done that for you?
I don't think so. I
Um,
don't think so. And I've had this conversation with somebody else that thought the same way, where in our circles, we were kind of the person that does that, which
it's
is
like a
fine.
role. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is absolutely fine. And I say, I don't think so. I don't know, maybe this sounds braggadocious, I don't know, but I know how much I put into trying to learn about somebody,
Mm,
creating an experience for somebody. Um, so no, I don't, that one I'll own. I don't
mhm,
think so. I don't think so. I don't know. I think I get that from my dad, where he was kind of always the center, not me, but he was always like the life of the party, trying to listen to other people, help
mhm.
other people, enjoy, making the moment enjoyable for people. So I've learned from him just kind of to make sure that people are okay, to see what they need, things like that.
Yeah.
Any of my friends listening right now, I love you to death. It's not a judgment against anybody, but I know that energy that I try to bring to a conversation, and I see it reflected in what I learned from my dad. So I don't know how it sounds, but yeah, that's mine. That's how I approach life and friends,
Mhm.
just kind of living it up. Because again, my responsibilities are taken care of. I want to design a life. I want to design experiences, whether it's conversations with people that I just met for the first time face to face, like today.
Mhm.
We spoke through messages a few years ago. My fault again. And then I circle back. I'm like, Judi, I'm so sorry about this. And I went into, here's the podcast. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm thinking. And just, we can just think about right now in these moments, in this last hour, how much we've brought to the table for other people to learn about, just sharing about each other, asking about each other.
Mhm.
I think that's powerful. I'm a creative person. You're a creative person. I think designing conversations, it's like an alchemy. What I bring to the table,
Ah,
what you bring to the table. I know I leave transformed from each of these conversations. And I've said that in the past. I stand up reassured that there are great people out there doing amazing work.
and feel less lonely when you're on
Yeah.
the edge, because
Yes.
when
Absolutely.
we know we're
Absolutely.
yeah, when we're not the only one, it really matters.
Yes.
Well, and John, what you talk about is a kind of deep listening that is intentional. It isn't just a skill. It isn't just something someone practices. It comes from a caring and compassion and curiosity in the way I
Yeah.
hear you talk about it. You're listening for something that you can amplify in someone you're talking to. And that can make such a huge difference. I mean, I'm thinking in my own life of two or three people who did that for me, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that when they spoke it, I changed. It's like they
Mm.
spoke me into more fullness of who
Yes.
I am.
Yes.
And I remember the first person who did that was Robert Day. And we were co-training on leadership, a leadership development program at Honeywell. And so he was the main trainer. I was learning from him. And we were about to walk into a room after having done a half day's worth of training. And he said, "Do you have any idea how much grace you have and how much people want to hear what you have to say?" And I'm like deer in the headlights, like, no, no, I have
Uh,
no idea. I do not see myself as graceful. And I grew up with an alcoholic, mean father. Nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. It was only safe
mm,
to stay quiet. How could anybody want to hear what I have to say? And so that was a shock to my system that he saw something in me that I didn't. So I spent the next several years paying attention to, was there any grace in something I did? Was there, did people seem to act as if they wanted to hear? I was looking for evidence of what he
there's a
said.
researcher in you.
Is this
Ah,
true? Is this true? And it
okay.
started to come out a little bit more. It's
Yeah.
like he spoke me into being. And so I try to do that for others. And I really hear that you do as well. And
And that's why I love these conversations, because just
yeah.
talking about this with you, I look at it in a way that I've never considered that.
Mm,
I always knew I was a good listener, but just the way that you describe what you've heard and how I've described it, it makes it fuller. It gives it more meaning. Again, just from us talking, sharing our
yeah.
experiences. Um, yeah, it just plays back to that kind of monotony of life. I hear too often when people get together and they're hanging out, it's kind of like we're just kind of repeating our days and catching each other up. And I just want to bring, I think it's my way of kind of trying to bring more color to the canvas about what life can
Mm,
be, especially pointing out to somebody the great value, the great habits, the great personality, whatever it is that I might see.
mhm.
Um, and as you get older, my father passed away in 2020, you realize I'm always the one that kind of speaks about, just says what's on his mind,
Yeah.
says what's on my mind. I don't want to wait anymore. If you have something to say, if you have something to share, just say it, within reason, respectfully,
Yeah.
tactfully. But
Right.
I don't know. I still don't think we say as much to each other as we should be sharing with each other. So I try
Mhm.
to live that myself.
Yeah. Well, and especially around love. We don't tell people we love them enough. We don't feel that love that's naturally in us, which to me
Mhm.
is the ultimate expression of spirituality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Judy, why don't we one last question and then we'll do a kind of a quick breakdown of two of your books. But what
Mhm.
does leadership mean to you?
Hmm. I guess it, more than anything else, it means making a difference through others. That and it's bringing out, like we've just been talking about, it's bringing out these capacities and gifts and callings in others in the service of something greater that we
Mm,
can do together collectively. And boy, the world needs that right now.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Judy. So we spent more time than I thought we would on your background, which I love because that segment of the podcast is growing, learning about my guest. And then we get to the books. I think it's amazing because it shows a little more than most conversations and interviews, if you will, who the person is. So I love that. You want to cover two of your books today. Why don't we do one and then the other? And in general, what made you write the book and an overview of the book and the lessons that somebody can take away. And your first book is Edgewalkers, People and Organizations That Take Risks, Build Bridges, and Break New Ground. How did that book come to be?
Yeah. Well, I talked a little bit about it when I talked about the research I did with leaders who have a spiritual foundation, and and pulling those stories together into some kind of pattern that would be useful to others. So um, the book actually came about because another friend of mine was just starting to write a column on Amazon, which I don't know if they even do that anymore, but he was he was selling like these short essays, and he wanted to collect other writers and bring them in to write um, essays too. And he said, "What would you like to write about?" And I said, "Well, I've had this idea of edgewalkers." And that idea, actually, the word came from two things. One was watching a Native American movie called Windwalker,
Mm-hmm.
and that's such a poetic name. And that term, Windwalker, sort of mystical. At the same time, I was co-facilitating a leadership development group that integrated spirituality, that met once a month. And that group, what we would do is each person would share their business challenge. And we, as a group, we called it hold, meaning send it spiritual energy, prayer, some kind of heart support for whatever they were working on. So we would do that throughout the month. And so we had shared spiritual practice supporting each of the leaders in our group. And I had told them about this idea of Windwalker and how I'd read an article about people who make change happen in organizations are on the edge of a system. They're not in the center. The center has to hold the
Yeah.
stability. It's the mainstream. And that those on the margins, whether that's a diversity issue that makes you on the margin or your role of being an external person, it's the people on the margins who get information from outside the system and bring it in, and they bring information from inside the system and they send it out, and how valuable those people on the edge are. And I kind of put edge together with Windwalker. This word edgewalker came, and I said, I think you guys are, we're all men, I think you guys are edgewalkers. They lit up. We were talking about individually people's eyes lighting up. Well, be in a group and have a group light up about a concept. And that's what happened. And we started talking about, what does it mean to be an edge walker? And I started asking other people when I listened to their stories. It's like, well, you sound like an edge walker to me. Do you feel like an edge walker? I mean, it just, I couldn't not talk about it, and started writing things down. My friend Tom said, would you like to write something for Amazon? I said, I'd like to write about edgewalkers. And he said, great, like 1,000 words. And I said, I'd like to profile people who are edgewalkers. And I found various people that I interviewed. So there was like 5 of them. We did 5 different essays. And I ended up incorporating those in the book. And Tom helped me find a publisher, and one thing led to another. So that's how the book itself came about. And then the day it was published, I was invited to be an academic advisor to a leadership development program run by Mel Toomey, who later, he and I co-authored a book. Do you know
did
Mel?
you?
Yeah, do you know Mel from Connecticut?
I have one of his books because I think one of the circles that you and I run in, I know of Mel through Brent Robertson.
Of course, yeah. Well, he only has one book, and it's the book that we published. And so somebody in that class that day had read my book, and he said, do you know what you have here? He was from Cuba. Do you know what you have here? This is a system. This is a machine. You've got to do something with this, and I'm going to help you.
I have that book somewhere behind me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Integrating Change, it's called. And I need to
Yes.
go read it again because it applies to, it's all Mel's work. I just was able to codify his work and get it into a linear format, because Mel was nonlinear. And one of those people who saw something in me that changed my life. So
Incredible.
I owe him so much and loved him so much.
Yeah.
So,
Now when I give it another read, I'm going to look because of the material. I think if you take a couple years to read a book, between readings,
Uh-huh.
when you come back to it, you just see it very differently. And now, having spoken to you, knowing that you worked with Mel, now
Mhm.
when I read it, it brings a different flavor and
Oh, yeah.
palette to it. So it'll be interesting to read it again.
Yeah, there's a little bit about Edgewalkers in there. He kept saying, "Bring your work in, bring your work in," and I'm like, this is about your work." His work is brilliant. So
Yeah, I think
yeah,
I think I read that maybe in 2021.
would have just come out.
And just with the chaos of life and everything, but for the longest time, I'm like, why does Judy's name sound familiar? I'm like, I don't know. You lose track of where you met somebody, how your paths cross. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to giving the book another glance, another read.
Oh, very cool. Me too.
And
Is
then Judy, the other book is Creating Enlightened Organizations, Four Gateways to Spirit at Work, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about that, just how it came to be and what somebody could find in the book?
Okay. That was the first book I wrote, even though it's not the first book that got published. And I didn't intend to write it. I was teaching a course at the University of New Haven on one of the first online courses. Edgewalkers always like to try new technologies and new ways of doing things. So when I learned that they would teach us how to do online courses, I'm like, I'm in. I want to play with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so I still love doing online courses. So the way that they did those courses was, instead of lecturing, you would write out your lecture. And I had been looking at the idea of, if you want to create an organization that really honors the integration of spirituality and work in a way that's pluralistic and honors diversity, how would you go about systemic change in an organization to make it more value centered, more spiritual, more open to the universe guidance? Now, however you might want to say it, there's different language for that. And so I had it was a 10-week course. I had 10 chapters that were originally lectures. And it's funny because I don't lecture when I teach courses. I might provide a little bit of content and background, but for me, learning comes from dialogue, and it comes from putting learning into action. You have to do something with it in order to learn. And so I just much more of an experiential teacher.
Mhm.
So lectures, it was like, I don't lecture. How am I going to write about this? But once I started writing about any of these topics, you were supposed to write like 3 or 4 pages. It would be 10, it would be 12, it would be 15. I couldn't stop writing because of all the things I'd been studying about workplace spirituality. And I got so excited about, here's how you implement it. These are things people are doing. This is what works. And to really look at best practices and put it in a way that can be implemented by anyone, depending on whether you have corporate support or not. These are things you can do. So the first section is all about individual practices, none of which need corporate support because it's inner work.
Yes.
And then the second section is about leadership and teams, and looking at what are different companies doing around different kinds of programs and retreats and concepts. The third section is, how do you change the whole system, the whole culture, doing assessments and various kinds of implementation of workshops and trainings and models and so on. And then the last section looks at, what is the role of business in the world in helping humanity evolve in a way that creates a world that works for everyone. And again, it's looking at, there's not very many organizations that have done that or are doing it, but still there's some models for that, and we can learn from them. So that's the way the book evolved. Was it was going to be a course, and then it turned into being a textbook
That's
for that
amazing.
course. And yeah, it was easy. It was just easy how it came.
Judy, I'm always curious when somebody's sharing their book here, how did each of these books change you? Or how did your
Mhm.
thinking of the material evolve in the course of writing the book, putting the book out? What might have changed in the way that you looked at the material of, or the focus of each of these books? Anything stand out?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, Edgewalkers was really focused at the individual leadership level. And so it's still central. That's my main work is around Edgewalkers now, but it's around building the community and supporting other people who want to use the language and the tools and the models. So for me, it's moved from coaching individuals and teaching people in workshops as helping their individual path to creating a community and looking at things more systemically. So that's been a big change. And I think I sort of alluded to how I used to think Edgewalkers was kind of you are or you aren't.
Hmm.
You were born with it or you're not. And to be much more open about realizing we all have an Edgewalker in us. It's an archetype. It's part of being human. Each of us has some edge that we're moved towards if we listen and honor it. And so how do we help people that really want to be supported in that, and that it can be anybody, and to also honor that not everybody feels drawn to Edgewalkers and that there is a role for it. I'll just briefly name the other archetypes to pique your
Yes, please.
curiosity.
Please.
There is the Flame Keeper archetype.
Mm.
The Flame Keeper is those who honor the founding values of the organization and want to keep that flame alive. So they're values centered. There's the hearth tender, and the hearth tenders are the ones that want to keep the home fires burning. They're like the day to day. What do we need to do right now to keep the children fed, to keep the fire burning, put a log on the fire, the basic efficiency of the organization, but at the same time, in a sense of home, a sense
Hmm.
of caring for family, that we just look day to day, but we're doing it in service of a sense of family in the organization. Then there's the placeholder, and the placeholder longs for the past and for the good old days of the way things used to be. And in many organizations, things used to be better than they are now. And so they're, in a way, they're like the flame keeper, but the flame keeper is open to the future, and the placeholder is like, the future does not look very good. I want to resist the future because I'd rather have stability. I don't want change. I'm not comfortable with that.
Hmm.
And I will challenge anything because it's probably going to be worse. So it's a kind of heavy energy, but it's a comfortable place for some people. And the last archetype is, I used to call it the doomsayer. They were the ones that are like, if we do that, the worst thing is going to happen. But they're very future oriented, but they're about what can go wrong. And someone challenged me once and said, all the other archetypes do sound a little more positive. What might be the healthy side of a doomsayer? And the healthy side is actually a guardian. And in spiritual terms, there's always guardians at the gate, that
Hmm.
if you're going to go into a spiritual experience, there are priests or shamans or guardians that protect you when you're going into some kind of different experience. And that's the way the guardians tend to see the world, is like, I don't want bad things to happen. I'm looking to the future and I want to prevent problems. And so I'm going to use my skills and my sensitivities to prevent those problems. And so all of those have a place in organizations, and particularly when an organization is going through change, which is most of the time these days. It's so unpredictable. And so it's just trying to figure out who are the people's voices that can really help, which archetypal voices can really help in this situation, and how, and we can measure this. And so no one is one pure archetype.
Mhm.
We have elements of all those. And I remember doing some work with some ministers. And one minister was trying to implement change in his congregation, and he came out very strong placeholder, and he said, I don't want to be that. I'm holding my organization back. I want to learn how to be more of an edge walker. I want to learn how to be open to change and help my congregation. And we can choose what we emphasize. They're just almost like VR headsets we can put on. You know, you know, this is the world I want to see right now. Oh, that one's not helping. I'll put that down. I'll put another one on.
Yeah, it's incredible how somebody may be going through the motions, believing they're doing the best for their organization, but then once you point it out, they're like, "Oh, I see what I'm doing. That's not quite what I mean to be doing." So, and
Mhm.
then they can look into another type and work towards that and see what of their attributes are more aligned with whatever type they want to be and call on those. So it's amazing just to show people what might be happening and they're just not even aware that that's what they're doing.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying about how you coach and that you don't tell people what to do. You say, here's some options for you. Here are some different possibilities, and help guide them through what's really going to work for them and where they want to go. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, these tools are the same way.
Judy, 10 books. What is next for your writing, if anything? Is there, I don't know if you're working on something now. You don't have to give away the store, but what might be your next focus if you were or are writing a book?
I'm not going to write any more books, she says. Who knows what the universe. I've, if it were easy, I would write a book on global consciousness.
Oof.
But because all my books are with different publishers, I have not self-published. I find the publishing process so bureaucratic and time-consuming and soul-draining that I just don't want to do that anymore. And frankly, my books don't sell. I don't promote my books. And so I put a lot of time and energy and effort into these books, and they're not out in the world. And I don't want to market them. That's just not my calling. It's just those people now who want to do that for me. But so maybe they'll get out there. But instead right now, I just started a Substack.
Okay.
And just stopped writing for my local newspaper. So I'm going to write for Substack that will be writing about applied spirituality, really integrating spirituality in different parts of our lives. And I want to do more music. I want to write more songs. I want to continue to build the Edgewalker community and support others. And I love supporting other people who are writing books, because I do know a lot about how to write books and how to get them published. So I support people, and there's others in my community who are support writers as well. I love the writing process. To me, writing is another spiritual practice.
Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, do you relate to that? Tell me.
Yeah. It's just, again, from, being quiet as a kid. And again, it plays into me as a listener where we're kind of trying to share with the world, maybe what we felt we needed as kids.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where all that comes from. And part of that also is just the power of expression, just the power of putting your words together, conveying it in such a way where you just kind of get lost.
Mhm.
And I've always been somebody with anxiety, like this ongoing kind of harmless anxiety if I don't do anything about it. So I channel it into whether it's music, whether it's podcasting, this conversation like this, or writing
Mhm.
or photography. Photography is my other thing. I got to find my camera and get back into that.
Yeah.
There's these creative outlets where when I dive into them, all that uncertainty, all that anxiety just goes away. I'm creating something.
Yeah.
And writing has just been just incredible. It's just incredible. It's something you can put together, share however you want, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's a newsletter like I
Mhm.
have, whether it's a book, whatever it may be. with different audiences, fine tuning your words. I love going through it over and over again, just picking the right cadence, the right words. It's just,
Yeah, yeah,
it's incredible. And it's something that I've really only found or realized how much it does for me in the last couple of years. But once I get into writing, it's just something that I can get lost in. And for me, it is spiritual because when you get lost in something like that, you're truly yourself. You're not worried about the outside world. Nothing is dictated by the outside world. It's completely yours. It's completely what you're designing and building. For me, when you're
mhm,
more in tune with yourself, that's one major part of spirituality, is just
yeah.
becoming more in tune with who you are. So that does it for me every time, even if it's just, if somebody's like, hey, can you write 1,000 words for me? It's like, all right, let's go. Let's do it. It
Uh-huh.
just, it's an amazing outlet,
Yeah,
spiritual outlet for me. Absolutely.
yeah, and it can be for others.
Judi, in starting to wrap up, before I forget, we're covering your books. What major book or what book has had a major influence or impact on you
Mm,
that you would cover on this series? You know, obviously we're covering yours. What
mm,
what what book stands out for
mm.
you in terms of what it's done for you in your career, your life, whatever it may be?
That's easy. It's called Trust, and it was written by Jack Gibb in 1978. And that book really set me on my path of looking at organizational change from through a spiritual and consciousness lens. And I was fortunate to be able to study with Jack Gibb and 120 other people who we had regular meetings with Jack. So he was a real spiritual mentor. And really, I guess, I talked about legitimacy earlier. Jack gave a lot of legitimacy to spirituality and to organizational change and systems change. And he said trust is the central factor in everything, beginning with self trust.
That's huge.
Yeah. And then trust of others and trust of our organizations. And eventually, the highest level of trust is trusting the universe, which was the name of his final book that never got published. But the trusting the universe has become a guiding principle for me. So that's the book, Trust.
I'll have to look it up and check it out. Judi, now finally in wrapping up, is there, and you shared your Substack, you shared what you want to do with your writing, but is there anything else that you want to share here? The floor is yours on anything that I might not have asked that you wanted to share, anything else you're up to you want to share. Please go ahead.
Um, I think what I would share is that I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Fayetteville is a highly conscious city that I feel very blessed to live in a place that honors the environment, honors spirituality, honors equality. We have incredible leadership. The University of Arkansas probably has a lot to do with the ambiance of the city. It's the flagship University of Arkansas, beautiful university. And so to live in a community, everywhere I go, I know people, and I've only been here 15 years. But in the first 2 years, I could go in a restaurant and I would know somebody because there's such a strong sense of community and connection and real caring for one another that feels like the right way to live in the world. And so I had never thought of it, but it would be wonderful to write about this as a model city so that people could really think about your own city, where
Mm.
you live, your own community. What would you want to emulate? How would you like to move it more towards a place that's really inviting for our full humanity? So I just really do feel blessed by being here. And uh, y'all come down, you hear?
That's the first time I've asked anybody if there's anything else that they wanted to plug, and they plugged their city. But that's incredible. That just shows you what an impact it makes on you, and you're not saying it from the standpoint of economic development, come do
Yeah,
business here. It
yeah,
really is the ambiance, like the um, the soul of the city.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that's a great point. Like just writing about it, if it came to that,
Mm,
writing about it, what makes it great, getting interviews, if that's what it calls on. Um, and again, maybe somebody in a different town reads it and be like, oh, we could do that here.
yeah, yeah.
This isn't just where I have to lay my head down at night, because I live in a different town or whatever. And yes, I may work in another town or another city, but on the weekends or in the afternoon, we can create community of whatever it might look like. So
Mm,
I think that's a solid reminder for people to realize, again, the way we said before, sometimes you just need that prompt, whether it's an example or a question to get you thinking in a different way. So I think that's powerful.
right. And we need models. We need to believe that individuals can change, organizations can change, cities can change, the world can change. We need models. If we can see it and believe it, then we'll have the courage to do what we're called to do, whatever little small part that might be. Then we'll, courage and curiosity about what's mine to do.
Yeah. And the thing is, nowadays it wouldn't just have to be if it came to a book. It wouldn't just have be that, but there's just so many ways of people from that community to be able to communicate with people across the country.
Yeah. Right.
What, no pressure to them, but whether it was a Zoom call, some kind of workshop about how to set certain things up, I think
Mhm.
that's incredible. Thank you for that reminder that, you can be that change you want to see. You can
Yeah.
step up and start a community group or whatever it may be. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
That was a good question. Thank you.
And again, Judy shared two of her books. The first, Edgewalkers, People and Organizations That Take Risks, Build Bridges, and Break New Ground. And the other book, and again, this is among 10 books. The second we covered today was Creating Enlightened Organizations, Four Gateways to Spirit at Work. Judy, thank you for sitting down for this conversation. This was awesome.
Thank you, John. It's wonderful to be with you and to learn more about you too.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your questions and getting those answers out of me. I really do. I really do. Because I'm not gonna lie, every time I sit down, whether it's something that someone says or a direct question that they ask or a direct question that they ask or mirror back to me, I'm always learning. So I appreciate that. If there's anything that I might have missed, there's so much to cover, something you think I should have asked Judy, please let me know. I'll reach out, see what kind of additional guidance, insight, knowledge I can get from her. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.